Hello, I'm Pavlina and this is YeJin.
We will be analyzing a scene from the 2007 musical film Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber from Fleet Street, a film by Tim Burton, starring Johnny Depp and Helena Bonham Carter. Overall, the movie is quite dark and quite depressing and mysterious. Sweeney Todd is obsessed with getting revenge to the point where he doesn't even care how many people he has to kill to get it.
The scene we're going to be analyzing is the scene where Todd and Mrs. Lovett are having a picnic, and Mrs. Lovett imagines what her ideal life would be like. Here, she sings a song by the sea. Why don't you take a look?
Still got to keep an eye on household expenditure. Which isn't to say we couldn't get some nice taxidermy animals, bring a touch of gentility to the place. You know, a boar's head or two. Mr. T, you listening to me?
Of course.
And what did I just say?
There must be a way to the judge.
Judge? Always arguing on the bloody old judge. We got a nice, respectable business now. Money coming in regular like. And since we're careful to pick and choose, strangers, people that won't be missed, who's going to catch on?
Oh, Mr. Todd, I'm so happy. I could eat you up, I really could. You know what I'd like to do, Mr. Todd? What a dream. If the business stays as good, where I'd really like to go in a year or so. Don't you want to know?
Of course.
Do you really want to know?
Yes, I do.
By the sea, Mr. Todd, that's a life I'd carve it. By the sea, Mr. Todd, oh, I know you'd love it. You and me, Mr. T, we could be alone in a house where we'd almost own down by the sea.
Anything you say.
Wouldn't that be smashing? Think a snug it'll be underneath our flannel when it's just you and me and the English Channel in our cosy retreat, kept on the and tidy. We'll have chums over every Friday by the sea. Don't you love the weather by the sea? We'll grow old together by the seaside, by the beautiful sea. It'll be so quiet, then who'll come by it except a seagull? We shouldn't try it though till it's legal for two. But a seaside wedding could be devised, me rumple bedding legitimised, me eyelids a flutter or turn into butter the moment I mutter I do.
Take this woman to be your lawful wedded wife. You may kiss your bride.
Down by the sea, married nice and proper. By the sea, bring along your chopper to the seaside by the beautiful sea.
Brought you some breakfast, dear. Mr. T, can I ask you a question?
What?
What did your Lucy look like? Can't really remember, can you?
She had yellow hair.
You got to leave this all behind you now. She's gone. Life is for the alive, my dear. We could have a life, us two. Maybe not like I dreamed. Maybe not like you remember. But We could get by.
Mr. Todd, Mrs. Lovett, Mum.
What is it, Anthony?
He has her locked in a madhouse.
Joanna.
Folks Asylum. I've circled the place a dozen times. There's no way in. It's a fortress.
I've got him.
Mr. Todd.
We've got her. Where do you suppose all the wig makers of London go to obtain their hair? Bedlam. They get it from the lunatics of Bedlam.
I don't understand.
It is clear right away that the scene is very different from the rest of the film. First, let's go over what happens in the scene.
Mrs. Lovett is completely lost in the image of the life that she could have and that she wants. She wants to share this with Todd, her love interest. It is clear to the audience that Todd isn't very intrigued by the plan, by his facial expressions and his tone of voice, which is all monotone.
However, throughout the scene, you can tell that Sweeney Todd starts to give in to Mrs. Lovett's power. Another key element in the scene is the film score. This being a musical film, the song itself is a very important part of the development in the scene, as well as the characters. The songs previously sung in the musical are quite dark and give an unpleasant feeling to the audience. They are mainly in minor keys, and the harmonies are quite dissonant, including the melody that the characters sing. If you have ever tried to sing along, then you'll know that the songs are actually very hard to sing due to all the unusual harmonies. The instruments go back and forth between an extremely high and low range, along with the heavy brass sections. The orchestration in the beginning of the song, By the Sea, follows the style of the previous songs, with the strings up in the very high range playing dissonant chords, making it sound uncomfortable. This keeps the unity of the song in the musical so that the piece doesn't feel out of place. However, it quickly becomes much more pleasant to the ear when the range goes a bit lower, much nearer to our vocal range, with agreeable harmonies. The rhythm of the song is much more upbeat as well. Although the song, Priest, from a previous part of the movie, is quite upbeat as well, a waltz, it feels much more heavy than By the Sea because of the big orchestration and the heavy brass, making it have a more majestic feeling to the song. Whereas By the Sea is much more light, having less of the full orchestra, and much less of the heavy brass instruments, enhancing the overall pleasant atmosphere of the scene. Nonetheless, there are some sections in the song that has some elements of the other pieces. In this section, there is a hint of the heavy brass like we heard in The Priest, along with some of the dissonant harmonies. The heavy brass appears again, followed by a deep organ solo in the wedding scene. These two parts in the music give a sense of tension between the two main characters fighting for their control of power.
There are a lot of changes in the setting of this scene. This allows for different lighting, colors, and costumes to influence the plot and the characters.
The scene opens up with a wide shot, which really isolates them from the world around them. Todd, who is sitting further out, is even more isolated than Mrs. Lovett, whose position in the middle of the frame suggests power or potential of power. In this part of the scene, Miss Lovett is quite toned down. She isn't wearing any bright colors, only white and navy blue, which the dark, diffuse lighting only supports.
Same goes for Sweeney Todd. He's only wearing black and white. However, you can already see somewhat of a power struggle beginning between the two dominant characters. It is even hinted at in the short dialogue that they have before the song.
There must be a way to the judge.
Judge? Always arguing on the bloody old judge.
When the location changes, it is introduced in a very similar way as the previous location, a tilt into a wide shot. However, this shot is no longer as wide as the one before, making the characters less isolated. Also, there are other people around them, which adds to the sense of normalcy. The shot after that is a reverse dolly shot, which ends at a medium shot with Mrs. Lovett and Todd, bringing them much closer together.
Here, what Sweeney Todd is wearing is very contrasting from what we have seen him wear throughout the movie. His black and white striped overall could resemble a couple of things. Firstly, the colors suggest him being a prisoner. He is a prisoner of multiple things, for example, his life, how his past keeps haunting him, therefore increasing his obsession for revenge. However, according to the scene, his prisoner-like outfit suggests that he's a prisoner of Mrs. Lovett's power in her dream, making Todd look powerless and controlled by Mrs. Lovett.
The second thing the outfit resembles is a baby's overall. It is quite ironic that the killer in the movie resembles a baby. However, we have to remember that this is Lovett's imagination, and his resemblance to a baby, not only in costume but also his posture, simply shows how weak Todd is in the scene, and how much power Mrs. Lovett could actually have over him, especially in this scene, like a mother having control over her baby.
Mrs. Lovett's costume has also changed, going from quite a diffused navy blue to a more vibrant navy blue, with some red shoelaces, ribbons, and belt. Note that not only the amount of blue increased on her, but we start to see more of the red, suggesting a change in character. In this scene, there is the most amount of blue in the setting as well. We can see that there are blue beach chairs, the sky and sea, the carpet, and so on. Also notice how the tone of blue that Mrs. Lovett is wearing is quite different than the tone of blue that is part of the setting. This could suggest that the dark navy blue on Mrs. Lovett represents reality, whereas the light blue of the setting represents peace. As this is the first scene of the dreamlike sequence, Mrs. Lovett is still somewhat imagining realistic events and is somewhat in reality, and that this is the most peaceful part of the dream sequence because it is just the beginning, before she starts to get carried away and get power and control.
When the location changes, it is introduced in a similar way as the previous location, with a wide shot. However, there is a dolly in which further eliminates the feeling of isolation, especially when Mrs. Lovett holds Todd's hand. Also, the amount of red Mrs. Lovett has increased. Now her entire dress is red. However, it is not very vibrant. Todd is back to wearing a black vest and a white shirt.
This part is the first time when a location is not introduced with a wide shot, but instead with a medium shot that shows that they're much less isolated, especially when we find out that they have guests and therefore are interacting with other humans in a completely natural way. When the camera tracks Mrs. Lovett to the table, the shot gets slightly wider. However, it is still very tight around the characters, giving less of a feeling of freedom, and we get much more of a feel of restraint. The red on Mrs. Lovett is enhanced with the pink background and props, which hints at that she has complete control of the scene and the people. However, Sweeney Todd stands out from the scene with his dark monotone suit, making him the dominant when the camera pans to show the people. This suggests that he is still restraining from Mrs. Lovett's power, and black, having a negative connotation, could show his negative feelings towards her, which is only supported by his facial expression.
This location is introduced like the first few, a wide crane shot. However, there is a big difference. The audience does not get the feeling of being isolated since they are surrounded by lots of people. Now, Mrs. Lovett is wearing the brightest dress yet. She's the dominant in this shot, since she is the only one wearing such bright colors. Most of the other people present in the short sequence are wearing white or very diffuse light colors. Even Todd is wearing a white jacket over his black vest. Toby is now the only one wearing black.
The reasons for that could vary, but considering the fact that black is a very dominant color in Mrs. Lovett's and Todd's reality, Toby could simply be a reminder of how this is only a dream and that they still need to go back to reality.
I think by now we can assume that red means power, which has been true throughout the movie. Clearly, Mrs. Lovett's power grew throughout the sequence as she gains more control over Todd. Blue, which has been the most common color for the setting, could simply mean peace and serenity, at least for Mrs. Lovett.
This is what makes the next setting so interesting. The windows in the background have both red and blue, in a way that shows connection. This could be what Mrs. Lovett's dream is really all about. The serenity of a normal life combined with the power she has over Sweeney Todd. The establishing shot of the next location is again more like the previous ones. However, the characters aren't separated from each other, so even though the shot is still quite wide, there is a sense of unity since the characters stand relatively close to each other. In this scene, the priest is always filmed from slightly a low angle, giving him power over the two of them. The angle increases, therefore putting the priest in a very powerful position. In Where Mrs. Lovett and Sweeney Todd turn to each other to kiss, they are filmed at a very high angle, which makes them seem very powerless. This marriage has bound them forever, and they are both powerless against this bond, which is ironic in a way, since it is Mrs. Lovett's dream to have power over Todd, yet she is the powerless one in this part because of the bound that marriage has brought them.
Another noticeable feature of this scene is the lighting. It is very yellow, which links back to the beginning of the movie, where Todd's wife gets brought to the party where she is raped. That scene was also very yellow.
Having this ball all in masks. There's no one she knows, that poor dear poor thing. She wanders tormented and drinks, poor thing. The judge has repented, she thinks, poor thing. Oh, where is Judge Turpin, she asks. He was there all right, and he not so contrite. She wasn't no match for such craft, you see, and everyone thought it so droll. They figured she had to be daft, you see,
So, what does the yellow represent in the film?
Considering the rape and how tense and uncomfortable Todd looks like at the wedding, it is easy to conclude that yellow symbolizes force. Todd does not want to marry Mrs. Lovett and feels like he is forced into it, which is clear from his actions.
However, the yellow in the scene, which was already used to show someone being forced into something, just adds and increases a feeling that this is wrong.
The last location of the dream sequence starts with a much closer shot than the previous one. It is much tighter around the characters, eliminating any sense of freedom or isolation. It may be just the three of them in the shot, but there is no longer a feeling of being completely alone. The characters are back to their old outfits from the beginning of the scene. However, Mrs. Lovett is wearing red striped tights and red laces, which weren't noticeable at the beginning, making it clear that her power is not gone.
Sweeney Todd, who is also back to his black vest and white shirt, is more affectionate. True, he is still very stiff and seems unnatural when he touches Mrs. Lovett's leg, but the action is still there. This, in a way, shows that Mrs. Lovett has won and that he is under her control.
Which becomes only more evident when she wraps her hands around Todd's and Toby's shoulders, showing her control over the both of them. The lighting is also very red, which only enhances her power. Speaking of Toby, again he is very similar to Todd. Since the resemblance is so clear, it foreshadows the end of the movie where Toby takes revenge on Todd and slits his throat like Todd did with so many people.
The transition back to their original location is very smooth, but the colors and the lighting, as well as the framing, change drastically. First, the camera moves out, again creating a much wider frame and giving the audience a sense of isolation from the characters, as well as the characters' isolation from the world around them. There is much less red, more black, and the lighting is much more diffused, showing that the dream sequence has ended, and that Mrs. Lovett no longer has that much power, even though she tries to cling on to what is left.
There is another drastic change when the scene changes. Coming back to reality, the characters are surrounded by black and gray. The colors are no longer so saturated. This scene opens up with a medium close-up of Todd, which is very interesting. He is back in reality, which should mean that he is more isolated than he was in the dream sequence. However, the reason for this is probably that he is restrained by his own goals and the revenge he is seeking. The shot is also filmed with a very shallow depth of field, yet again isolating Todd from the world around him. Even Mrs. Lovett is out of focus until she finally breaks through to him. The editing also slowed down when they came back to reality. During the song, the pace was quite fast, and as Lovett's power grew, and as she kept imagining new and new things.
Maybe not like you remember. But we could get by.
Mrs. Lovett tries to get some control over him, but only ends up failing because this is not her dream anymore. She has no power, which is clear from the lack of red she has on, which we discussed as representing power. In fact, she is wearing all black, which just adds to the dark mood of the scene.
There's no way in. It's a fortress.
We are also reminded of the color yellow. All Todd can remember about his wife is her yellow hair, and his wife is the reason he kills all those people, showing how she, even though she is dead, can force him into a natural action.
From the lunatics of Bedlam.
I don't understand.
We shall set you up as a wig maker's apprentice.
And that is the end of our analysis of Sweeney Todd, Demon Barber, and Fleet Street by Tim Burton. Hope you enjoyed it.